Hello, my name is Matthias and welcome to the FPL Scope. Today we are going to take a look at the weekend walkthrough, which is something I do every Monday, and that's where I go through the past weekend's matches in the Premier League from a fantasy Premier League perspective. But before we start with the match at the top of your screen right now, Liverpool against Bournemouth, we have to talk about the Friday match between Nottingham Forest and Sheffield United, two teams that I constantly mix up for some reason. And that game was won by Nottingham Forest, 2-1. Taiwo Awoniyi scored the winning goal, really nice winning goal from Awoniyi, who has now scored, I think, 8 goals in his last 6 matches in the Premier League or something. But the shame about this result or this fixture and anything we can take from that fixture is the fact that Nottingham Forest don't have the best fixtures going forward. So Awoniyi and Gibbs-White and those guys are sadly not the best FPL options currently, but they could become really good eventually in the season. And as far as Sheffield United goes, they're not really a team to pay that much attention to at all because they have been really, really bad so far, and I think they're going to just keep being bad for the rest of the season. So just to get one positive about Sheffield United, they did bring in a really good player in Gustavo Hamer. I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce it, but he scored the goal for Sheffield United that broke the clean sheet for Matt Turner and all of the players that owned him in Fantasy Premier League, me included. But that was a really nice goal by Hamer, Gustavo, whatever his name is. But he is a really nice player, and he's only 5.0 as a midfielder. So he could potentially be an option eventually in the future for a cheap price. But other than that, not really that much to talk about in that fixture. The Turner clean sheet was gone, and most people stopped watching because that was pretty much the only reason to watch that game. But Awoniyi, again, looks great. Gibbs-White looks great. It's just a shame that Nottingham Forest fixtures are that bad. But let's move on to the actual weekend's fixture. I mean, I guess Friday night is the weekend, but the proper weekend, Saturday and Sunday. And the first fixture we got on the Saturday, or one of the first fixtures at least, was Liverpool against Bournemouth. And this ended up being a 3-1 win for Liverpool. Not entirely surprising, given the two teams' level of play last season. Speaking of last season, this match ended 9-0 for Liverpool, and they completely destroyed Scott Parker's Bournemouth. But this is an entirely different Bournemouth side, which is something we got to see from the start of this match. Because Bournemouth were at, I don't know how to describe it even, but they were at Liverpool's throat, I guess, from the start of the game. And they got a goal disallowed at first, which was disallowed for offside, which is kind of controversial. I think it's offside, but I've seen other goals like that where it's deemed that the defender made a play on the ball, so therefore the offside position player is not offside anymore. We saw this in, for example, the Nations League final between France and Spain, where there was a pass toward like a offside placed Kylian Mbappe, and then I think it was, who was it? Mark Bartra? No, some Spanish defender who tried his best to stop the pass through. He managed to get like a toe on it or something, and then that was deemed enough for the defender to have made a play on the ball, so a new play resumed, and Mbappe wasn't offside anymore. So I think actually, judging from how they've like used the rules that they have currently, I think the first goal probably could have stood, but didn't really matter anyway, because Bournemouth took the lead pretty soon after. They scored with the guy that I like to call Castor Semenyo, but I know that's not his real name. His name is Antoine Semenyo. It's just, as a former sports journalist, the Semenya, that name is has some connotations with the first name, which is obviously the Olympic runner who's a fantastic athlete in her own right. But Antoine Semenyo is looking like the best 4.5 option in attack, it seems like, because he scored again. He got a pretty lucky assist against West Ham in game week 1, but he showed some promise against West Ham, and that was enough to get the starting place against Liverpool. And once again, he looked really good and scored a goal as well. So he's definitely someone to pay attention to going forward as like your best cut price forward option, I think. He's going to play quite a few matches for Bournemouth, and Bournemouth are going to be a pretty decent team, at least going forward, because Antonio Raiola is a really good manager, and they have made some really shrewd signings. Is it Alex? No, what's the name of the guy? Scott? Alex Scott? Is that the TV presenter? Anyways, they have a new midfielder who came from Bristol City or Bristol Rovers. Again, my apologies to those teams because I know they are rivals, but a really good talent from the Championship. And they also brought in Tyler Adams now from Leeds in midfield as well. So they really strengthened what was like the poorest part of their team so far. So I think Bournemouth will be a pretty decent team. They got a draw against West Ham, lost against Liverpool, which is not really surprising. At Anfield, it's really difficult to beat Liverpool. But yeah, they lost in the end to Liverpool, even though they took the lead. And that was partly because of Liverpool's outstanding attacking talents, because they have so many of them. So it's been so difficult to choose. Who do you choose between Jota, Salah, Darwin, and Gakpo? It's been like a major headache for anyone in preseason, and that's why most people stayed away from it. But it seems like Jota and Diaz were the ones to go for, because both of those guys really produced in this game. The first goal, Jota got the assist, kind of a lucky assist because it hit the defender on its way to Diaz, and Diaz did everything himself. He lobbed it up to himself and had a really nice cheeky shot that went in, and they got 1-1. Then they won a penalty. Szoboszlai, who was fantastic in this game, by the way, he could have easily been the standout player next to Diaz. Dominic Szoboszlai, who could be a really good FPL option eventually as well. Looked really good. He won a penalty. It was kind of cheap. He kind of like baited the guy into fouling him right at the edge of the box, but that led to a penalty for Salah. Salah, as he often does on penalties, he missed it, but he actually scored a rebound. So for anyone with him in fantasy, like myself, who had him as captain, that counted as sort of like an assist. So us Salah captainers were hoping for more returns from Salah. If he had scored a goal, that would have been worth like 14 points as a captain probably, because it would have been 5 points for the goal, probably 2 bonus, potentially 3 bonus, but not after the penalty. It was most likely going to Neto anyway, the goalkeeper for Bournemouth. But yeah, it wasn't meant to be for Salah. It was instead Jota that scored the final goal, the 3-1 goal. So Jota got an assist and a goal. I think Diaz got at least a goal. Did he get an assist as well? Maybe, but those two guys were fantastic. Salah slightly behind them, and Liverpool once again showed that they can score a lot of goals, but they're also going to be susceptible to conceding goals as well. So that's why Trent Alexander-Arnold has not gotten off to the best start in FPL, and most managers that are like super engaged and follow FPL content preseason jumped off of Trent Alexander-Arnold. I didn't have Arnold in my first draft either, so I'm just gonna say it. I saw that coming, that he wasn't probably going to be the best asset, especially with Liverpool lacking that defensive midfielder. They did bring in Wataru Endo now as a defensive midfielder, but he started on the bench obviously in this game. Came on eventually, but either way, Liverpool got the win. Didn't really impress that much. They had some really shaky defensive things at the start of the game especially, but they have so many outstanding players that they will win a lot of matches at Anfield, regardless of how poor they have been in midfield and stuff. Alexis McAllister also got sent off. Really stupid red card, I think. It was just a normal challenge. 2 guys trying to kick the ball. McAllister was slightly later than, I can't remember exactly who he kicked in the end. Bournemouth midfielder. And it ended up being a red card for McAllister, which I think is super harsh. Like, it was not bad intent. And the other guy basically did the same move. It's just it ended up being the Bournemouth player that got hurt and got the ball first. So it could have been a yellow card for sure, but a red card is really harsh, I think. But either way, Liverpool, they have to sort out their midfield. They probably should make some more signings. Endo probably gets a start next time around. Maybe that makes Trent a better option. Maybe that makes Salah a better option. We'll get to see eventually. But Liverpool have a really tough game against Newcastle, so it's going to be really interesting to see how they cope against a better team. Bournemouth, on the other hand, I mentioned Semenyo already. He is one of the better players in that team. He is going to be a really good option for 4.5, I think, and he's definitely someone to watch. Justin Clifford as well came on and did pretty well, but Bournemouth, for now, stay away, but pay attention to especially Semenyo, I think. Moving on to the next game, we have Fulham against Brentford, and this was pretty much a one-way street for Brentford to win the match easily, away from home. West London derby, and Brentford are a far superior team to Fulham at the moment, because Fulham, they just sold Mitrovic to Saudi Arabia. Joao Palhinha, he was back for this game actually, came on in the second half, and that's a huge positive for Fulham, because they've really missed Palhinha, because he was one of their best players last season, along with Mitrovic. But life without Mitrovic is going to be tough for Fulham, because goals will be hard to come by. Raul Jimenez played as a striker, but he was sort of not really a striker. He had like the Kane type of role where he dropped down in midfield quite a lot. So Fulham, not looking the best defensively. Willian is a year older. Harry Wilson is decent, and Andreas Pereira is decent, but it just doesn't seem to be clicking for Fulham, who might be struggling with that second season syndrome as well. So I think Fulham is one of the teams to target going forward, which is really good news for Arsenal, who played them at home in Game Week 3. So I think that's going to be a really interesting fixture. I'm recording this before the Arsenal game, obviously, because I'm putting this video out before the Arsenal game against Crystal Palace. So it'll be really interesting to see if guys like Martinelli and those guys step up. Saka, obviously, Ødegaard potentially. because Arsenal might be the team to have offensive players from in Game Week 3. I know a lot of people already have Saka and potentially Martinelli as well, so it's definitely something to keep an eye on. But Brentford in their own right have some fantastic offensive players in their team, and those guys are Johan Vesa and Brian Mbeumo. They're both the best players so far in FPL for non-expected or non-penalty expected goals index, I guess it is, or involvement, sorry. Both of them. And Mbeumo has gotten 2 penalties on top of that. So Mbeumo had another major game. He scored a penalty and scored a late goal as well after Wissa got subbed off. Mbeumo became the striker because Brentford changed their system again. They played with back 3 and 2 wing backs in the first match, in the opening match against, can't remember off the top of my head, but against Spurs. But now against Fulham, they play with a regular back 4. So someone like Rico Henry, who looked amazing in Game Week 1, wasn't quite as attacking this game week. So maybe Rico Henry isn't that amazing prospect. He's still a good prospect because obviously Brentford kept the clean sheet, and he's still going to be attacking as a fullback. And Thomas Frank even said that they are going to switch between having the 3 at the back and wing back system or the regular 4-3-3 that they play with now. So they play with Kevin Schade at one of the wings, Wissa up front, and Mbeumo on the other wing. And that seemed to work out really well because Wissa was, once again, fantastic. And he keeps getting overlooked in Fantasy Premier League. He was also, speaking of my first draft, he was in my first draft in preseason, Wissa and Mbeumo, because I had a lot of faith in Brentford. Especially Wissa and Mbeumo without Tony last season were fantastic. And they have just kept going without Tony. And you'd expect Brentford to struggle without Tony, who is their best player, but they are like a system team. Thomas Frank has a really nice system in place. They have several cogs in the wheel. Like, even if Tony is out, they can just put in another one and they're going to be just fine. And that's what they've shown so far. They're going to score a lot of goals, and defensively, they're not too bad either. So Brentford are definitely a team to target currently because they have really good fixtures. They have showed some really good form, and Mbeumo has gotten 2 penalties, kind of lucky. The penalty, especially against Fulham, was really cheap. Like, it was Wissa just running into Tim Ream and getting Tim Ream a second yellow card as well, which made things a lot easier for Brentford as well. So kind of lucky there with Brentford with the penalties, both against Spurs and against Fulham, 2 kind of dubious penalties. I think the one against Spurs was probably correct to be given, even though it was really cheap. But this one against Fulham seemed especially cheap. So, but either way, Mbeumo, thanks the FPL gods for that, because he scores, and he got 16 points this game, which was huge for players like myself or managers like myself that have Mbeumo in their team. I'm kind of sad I don't have Wissa though, because he looks absolutely amazing. So he's definitely in consideration for the striker spot, which we'll get to with the next match. Because Wolverhampton against Brighton, sort of as expected, it was a huge win for Brighton, but once again, Wolves showed that they have so much in their team. It's just that they can't finish the chances. That was the big difference between these teams, because as you can see from the expected goals, Wolverhampton had 2.06 and Brighton had 2.27. It's really even when it comes to expected goals, but in terms of the scoreline, 1 goal for Wolverhampton and 4 goals for Brighton, who were once again amazing. Joao Pedro was surprisingly benched for this game. I was among the managers who felt really smug after the game week 1. Like, oh, look, Joao Pedro is going to be in the team. A lot of the games, he is the new number 9. They brought him in for 30 million, even though they had in-season from before. He's going to play so many matches. No worries about his playing time. And then he gets dropped against Wolverhampton, and they continue to just score. And Enciso was the best player on the pitch, as the Serbi said himself. Like, he said, and he even called him Enciso, so maybe that's the way you say it. But he said Enciso was the best player on the pitch. So I think Joao Pedro's playing time is going to be a bit muddied going forward, because Welbeck kept his place, which was surprising because he was really bad against Luton in that opening game. But he got another chance, didn't really score anything, but led the line pretty well because Brighton ended up winning the match. But Mitoma had that fantastic opening goal, pass from Estupinian. It was pretty much a goal from there, because Estupinian's pass was just perfect. Passed it 5 yards straight to Mitoma, who just had to run 30 yards before he shot it easy. No, but for real, Mitoma's goal was amazing. Mitoma is a great player. Kind of sad that I don't have him, but I'm also kind of happy that I don't have him, because I had him 2 game weeks last season and he blanked both of them. And in between those game weeks, or the 4 game weeks before and the 4 game weeks after, he just banged and scored every single game. So I don't know, maybe he's one of those cursed players that doesn't work out for me, but I'm kind of jealous that I don't have him compared to other, or jealous of the people that do have him in their team. That also counts for Solly March, who has been the best Brighton asset once again this season. Like, some people mentioned him in preseason. He had like a sort of, he didn't play that much in preseason. That's why I was sort of turned off by him as well. And I thought like Mitoma would be a better pick regardless. And also thought Joao Pedro would be a better pick because he was 1 million cheaper and at taking up a forward spot rather than a midfield spot, which seemed better at the time. But currently, not so sure about that. Joao Pedro came on. He came on with like 40 minutes left, to be fair. But the score was already 3-1, I think. Or potentially even 4-1. I think it was 3-1 when Pedro came on. And the only thing he did was getting a yellow card. So he might be on pens. He's probably going to play quite a lot still. They're playing West Ham at home next match. And Brighton always destroy West Ham. So I do have Joao Pedro on my team. And I'm not feeling good about selling him. But I feel like I sort of have to because there are so many good striker options that we'll get to in the later videos this week. But Brighton, once again, fantastic attacking-wise. They did concede a lot of big chances again, though. Wolves had several huge chances that they missed. The goal that they got was actually not the biggest chance. Like, they had like 4 chances that were bigger just about than the actual goal, but they just couldn't score any of the goals. So yeah, they look for a team that has 0 points and has 1 goal scored and 5 goals conceded so far. They actually looked not too bad, Wolverhampton. It's just that they can't score and they concede silly goals, I guess. They also conceded silly red cards, or if you can even concede red cards. But Matheus Nunes got angry towards the end of the match and pushed over a player after like a small little duel in the box. He got, I think it was the second yellow, and he got a red, and he's out for the next game, which is really bad news for Wolves because he's one of their best players. And I think they play Everton. Yeah, they play Everton next match, which is going to be huge for both teams because both of those teams sorely need a win after 2 opening losses where they looked, at least Everton in the first match looked decent. The second match, as we'll get to, they did not look decent at all. But Wolverhampton as well looked pretty good against Brighton at times, but again, conceded too many goals and couldn't score. So that's the big problem for Wolverhampton, really. Let's move on to the next few fixtures, and that is Spurs against Man United. I think this was a quite interesting game. 2 teams that we are kind of unsure about. Man United, they're supposed to push on and be like among the top 4, top 3 teams. Spurs, Ange Postecoglou coming in, don't really know what to expect. Thought this was going to be a pretty fun game, pretty even game. The start of the match, it looked pretty even as well. Man United were probably the better team at the start of the game, but like Wolverhampton, they can't put away their chances. And Fernandes missed an open header. Rashford missed an open header, I think, as well, from the naughty, even Rabona pass from Fernandes. So Fernandes actually looked pretty good. Like, his underlying stats, this was sort of like the Fernandes of the 2022-23 season, where he produced so much but just didn't get any FPL points. And that's sort of the downside with Fernandes. They still don't have a team that can take their chances, Man United. They create a lot of chances, but they don't really score a lot of the chances because offensively they're still lacking something. They don't have Højlund that's difficult to say, yet left. They don't have Højlund yet. Jesus. I can't say that. Yeah, they are still waiting for Højlund to come back from being injured, and they're struggling offensively. But Bruno Fernandes, to be fair to him, looked a lot better in this match. And currently, if I had both Fernandes and Rashford in my team, I'd probably look to sell Rashford over Fernandes. But at the same time, could make a case that maybe you should just sell Man United players entirely because they don't look good at all. Even in this game, they started off pretty well, created a lot of good chances, but then Spurs scored, and after that, Spurs were kind of the best team in the match. Spurs as well, not really as impressive as they looked at times against Brentford. I still think they have a lot of issues to work through. They obviously got a huge win, 2-0 win, which is fantastic for them. Destiny Udogie looked good again at left back. He's someone that I have in my own team currently. But especially their midfield, Bissouma, once again, fantastic. He might have, for the first 2 game weeks, I think he might be at least top 3 best players so far in the Premier League. Like, he's been that good in both matches. He's been really, really good. And Pape Matar Sarr to his right as well, or next to him in midfield, was also fantastic. He scored the opening goal, really well taken goal. He sprinted into the box. He got into a lot of good positions, Sarr, which is something he showed during preseason as well. So I think he, for 4.5, that's pretty much a steal. So I think he's also we talked about Semenyo being a good 4.5 forward. I think Sarr is probably the best 4.5 midfielder currently, because he's going to get into a lot of good positions in the box, and Spurs are going to be attacking quite a lot under Postecoglou. So Sarr, if he gets to play every game, because he didn't play the first match, obviously, if he gets to play every game, at least until Bentancur is back from injury, which is like November, December, I think, he could be a really nice enabler, at least someone who you could have as your 8th attacker who can play whenever someone else doesn't play, which is sort of what you want, because you can't play 8 attackers at once, sadly, because there are so many attackers you want to play currently. But Sarr is someone that is like, it doesn't feel bad to bench him, but it doesn't feel bad if you have to use him either. So I think he could be a decent option. Speaking of good FPL options, though, James Maddison looked really good against Brentford in the first match. Against Man United, maybe not so much. And more worryingly, he was seen on crutches after the game, which is not the best look for anyone that has Maddison in FPL. But he's still like the talisman for Spurs, still takes most of the set pieces. So if he's back from healthy from his slight injury, it seems like, then he's still going to be a good option, especially with the 3 matches that Spurs have coming up. They have 3 really good matches now in Game Week 3, 4, and 5. But if he's on crutches, maybe not the best idea. Maybe not the best idea to get him until you get some news, at least. I remember last season, speaking of Fernandes, actually, he posted a picture of himself with like a walking boot on while he was watching TV or something, and most people freaked out and sold him. And then it turned out that he was actually fit to play in the next game. So it doesn't really have to mean anything that Maddison is on crutches and has that walking boot. It might just be a precaution. We know Maddison has had some injury issues in the past, so I guess they just need to be really proactive and make sure that nothing is wrong with Maddison. But if they lose him, it's going to be a big loss, because offensively, Heung-min Son and Richarlison have looked pretty poor at the start of the season, or at least like not involved enough. Son is just way out to the side, and Richarlison drops really deep. He has taken over the Kane role without being half a good a player that Kane is. So yeah, Spurs, not the most impressive, but they still got a 2-0 win. They got a 2-2 draw against Brentford in the first match as well. So decent start to the season for Spurs. But they still have a lot more to come, I think, eventually. Same goes for Man United. I'm not sure about selling either Fernandes or Rashford. I'm currently looking at potentially selling Rashford myself. And I don't even have Fernandes. But I think both those guys, they could score now against Nottingham Forest. It feels kind of bad to sell them before Nottingham Forest. But then again, Nottingham Forest have been pretty solid defensively so far in the Premier League. So who knows what's going to happen in that game, really. Moving on to Man City against Newcastle. This was a much more tight affair, sort of, like not as open as the Spurs against Man United match. And City took the lead pretty early. Julian Alvarez with a fantastic shot. But still, the main standout in this game was Phil Foden, who, in the absence of Kevin De Bruyne, really stepped up and showed why he is so highly touted, why people are mentioning him as potentially like a top 10 player in the world at times. Because he has that level, like his close control, his passing, his dribbling, his shooting at times is amazing. So this was one of those games where you looked at Foden and you're thinking, like, how is he only 7.5 in FPL? He is someone that is firmly on my watch list currently, and he might be the one that I bring in for Game Week 3. He looked that good, and he's going to get playing time now, because De Bruyne is out, Gundogan is gone, Mahrez is gone. I've said this several times now. I'm sure they're not going to get Paqueta. There's some issues with that. They might still get Jeremy Doku, who's a right winger. Obviously, Bernardo Silva will come back. He was out with an illness in this match, but Foden, with the way he played, I think he's going to play going forward as well. And the same goes for Alvarez. Alvarez played pretty much every game De Bruyne didn't play last season. So obviously Guardiola, who is sort of like, he has his preferences when it comes to which players play where and at which times. I think Alvarez, as long as Kevin De Bruyne is out, is pretty nailed as well, especially with the lack of options that they have. They do have Cole Palmer. They do have Bernardo Silva coming back from illness now as well. Kovac has joined as well, but I don't know. For now, I feel like both Alvarez and Foden are definitely good options to go along with Haaland. But Haaland is obviously still the best option. But he was kept quiet in this game, quiet enough at least for him. He had a couple of decent chances to shoot, shot it just wide a couple of times. On his day, he probably could have had 2 goals, but this is the type of game where sometimes it's 2 goals, sometimes it's 0 goals. Like, the chances weren't that big, but they were big enough for Haaland to score at least. But much of the credit for keeping him quiet was Newcastle's defense and Sven Botman, who is one of the best defenders in the league, if not the entire world. So he once again showed his class and did a really good job against Haaland and kept them as quiet as you can hope for, really, if you're Newcastle. But still didn't lead to any points. Newcastle couldn't really produce much going forward. Bruno Guimaraes had some weird decisions offensively that I didn't like to see, but he's obviously a good player. I think Harvey Barnes needs to play more for them rather than Gordon. I think Gordon is a decent player, but I think Harvey Barnes is just a step above. And once again, Alexander Isak, he was the talk of the town in Game Week 1, scoring 2 goals, but this time didn't really get the chance to do much and was subbed off once again right past the 60th minute mark, because that's always going to happen, especially now that they have so many left wingers. It's going to be Isak to Wilson or Wilson to Isak in the 60th or 70th minute pretty much every game. And that's why I feel like Wilson and Isak, especially now with the bad fixtures at the start of the season, kind of a watch and see sort of thing. I said all throughout preseason with Isak and Wilson, you stay away from them until one of them gets injured, and then you buy the other one. So that's probably going to be my tactic going forward as well, because there are some really good options, and Alvarez is definitely one of them. And I mentioned Wissa before, and I'm going to mention a third huge option as well at the end of this video, towards the end of this video. But City 1-0, a really strong performance from City. Guardiola was really happy, especially if Foden was amazing. I haven't heard Guardiola say that much about Foden's game, but he must have been impressed, surely. I know he keeps benching Foden for some reason, even though Foden has this type of high level in him. But I think for now, Foden has to play, especially with De Bruyne out. They need that really creative player offensively, and Foden is just that. He created 7 chances, which is absolutely phenomenal. So yeah, Foden definitely on my radar. And City, with the fixtures that they have, the next 4 fixtures are just absolute joke in terms of, I think they face like Sheffield United, Fulham, Wolverhampton, and some other Bournemouth or something like that. Like they have like the best sort of fixtures in the next 4. So yeah, I'm kind of tempted to triple up on Man United or Man City. I mean, not Man United for sure. I'm not going to triple up on Man United offense, but Man City offensively, I might look to triple up potentially pretty soon. Then next up we have Aston Villa against Everton, and this was just a demolition really from Aston Villa. I think Everton started the game decently for the first like 10-15 minutes. They had some pressure on Aston Villa, but from that point on, after the first goal, especially when Leon Bailey passed it to McGinn, who scored the opening goal, from that point on, Aston Villa were just cruising through this match. And really sorry for Watkins and Diaby owners. Not really sorry because I don't have them myself, but I was pretty happy that they didn't score that many points. But Watkins got 5 points and Diaby got 3 points in a match that they won 4-0. So that's obviously not the best if you have one of those or even both of those players. But there were so many standout players from Aston Villa in this match, and it just showed that the width of their team, like the depth that they have in their squad. They're looking to sell Digne, who was probably their best player in the first half at least, with fantastic crosses all across the board. He had a great cross that led to a penalty. The 2-0 goal, I think, was the penalty. Great cross in. It was headed down to Watkins. I think it was a Digne cross that he came from, but at least the ball was headed down to Watkins. Watkins touched it before Pickford, and Pickford, channeling his inner Roman Reigns, did like the Superman punch straight to the face of Watkins, and even hit him on the foot as well, I think, and conceded a penalty from that. Watkins barely got it, or almost got it over the line as well, but I think there was I can't remember which, I think it was Patterson who cleared it off the line for Everton. But it still resulted in a penalty. The referee took a couple seconds and decided to blow the whistle for a penalty. And we got confirmation that Watkins is not any longer taking penalties. It was, it was Douglas Luiz stepping up to take the penalty. And I think the commentators in the match as well mentioned later on in the match that it was either going to be Douglas Luiz or McGinn. They had been practicing penalties all week, and those were the 2 guys in contention to take the penalty. So Watkins, after missing another penalty in preseason, seems entirely off penalties. That's probably going to hamper his production value. I've seen people say like maybe it's a positive for Watkins because he's not going to miss penalties, but you only get 2 points lost from missing a penalty, and you gain 4 points from scoring it. So you'd have to miss 2 penalties for every 3 you take for it to break even, really. So losing penalties, even if you are a bad penalty taker, is a negative for you as an FPL asset. So that's a negative for Watkins. But Watkins again looked really good, and on another day he could have had one of those, or probably another goal. If he scored another goal and had the assist or the penalty assist that he got, he could have had bonus points as well. But he was subbed off in the 74th minute or so for John Duran, and immediately I think he's Colombian, the Colombian striker, basically took advantage of the situation when Ashley Young threw the ball towards Michael Keane, throwing the ball rapidly to the worst player on your team, and Michael Keane was not ready to get the ball. John Duran was really ready to get the ball. He had a pretty clumsy touch, Duran, but he fixed it by doing a really good finish and scored a goal, which must have hurt a bit for Watkins owners especially. So Watkins a little bit unsure about him because he is a great striker, and to be fair, for 8.0, people said he was overpriced at the start of preseason, but then once Jesus and Nkunku were injured, people were like, oh, Watkins, he's actually a good price. And he is a decent price. He got 10 points over the first 2 game weeks, and he's looked pretty good. And Aston Villa have looked amazing offensively, especially. Even against Newcastle, they looked really good offensively, and against Everton, they just completely dominated the game. But yeah, Leon Bailey was the standout player of the match, just like he was against Everton last season, I think, when he scored 2 goals. He has a thing for playing against Everton, I guess. It was really good. So a lot of players at Aston Villa impressed. Not a lot of Everton players impressed. But Danjuma actually came on after about 30 minutes. Calvert-Lewin, yet another injury. He collided with Pickford pretty early in the game. Danjuma came on and looked really good. He had a couple nice runs on the wing. He actually had a really good defensive run as well, where he got the ball back in, was really cool and calm in possession of the ball in his own half, like pretty close to his own goal as well. So Danjuma looks like an outstanding signing for Everton, and I think with just the amount of good players Everton have in their squad, eventually they're going to come good. It's just a matter of, is Sean Dyche the manager to take them or to keep them up in the Premier League, really? Because I think they have too many good players to struggle that much. Tarkowski in defense is good. Michael Keane is awful. Why he plays over Branthwaite or Godfrey, I will never know. He made mistakes for both, especially the Duran goal, but also earlier in the match. Yeah, was it 3-0 goal? 2-0 goal? I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was another throw-in, this time from Aston Villa, that went into the box, and he just goes in and just passes it straight through to, was it Bailey, I think, who scored that goal. So yeah, Keane looking awful, but apart from Keane, Tarkowski is good. Garner he had some really nice moments as well, really nice pass earlier in the game. Danjuma is really good. Their whole midfield, I think, Garner, Doucouré, Onana, they are really good players. Idrissa Gana maybe not as much anymore. He's sort of on his way down. He had a pretty poor game against his former team, while Digne had a pretty good game against his former team. But yeah, Everton, they have a lot of good players, but not enough to get the win, or be even close to getting the win against Aston Villa. So they need to do better against the lesser teams of the league that they're going to face now in the next 3 or 4 fixtures. Moving on to the final game of the week, and which is personally my favorite game of the week because I'm a West Ham fan, and Mikel Antonio scored what ended up being the winner. And he's the player I want to highlight. I know Ward-Prowse is sort of the standout player because he joined on his debut, got 2 assists, beautiful corner assist to Aguerd on the 1-0 goal. He got the assist for Antonio's 2-1 goal as well after Chelsea had equalised earlier in the game. Really nice goal by Carney Chukwuemeka, by the way. He just completely got Souček on his wrong foot and turned back into the middle of the pitch, or closer to the middle of the pitch, and shot it into the other corner. Chukwuemeka, really nice goal from Chelsea, but Chelsea looked a way better side than West Ham in the first half. But in the second half, actually, it's pretty even though West Ham played with 10 men for most of it, after Aguerd got a really stupid second yellow card after about like 64 minutes or something. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, Chelsea, after a really good first half, Nick Jackson once again looked really lively. I think he's the third forward option that I'm really considering. Still hasn't scored though. He has really good non-penalty expected goal involvement, but still no goal involvements. So I don't know really about Chelsea. Like, they played Liverpool, and Liverpool were away from home. Liverpool were really bad away from home last season, so maybe that result was a bit misleading. Maybe Chelsea aren't that good yet, but they did show some really promising signs, and especially Raheem Sterling. He looked on fire. Like, he was super quick. He got the penalty that Chelsea missed, which is also something I have to talk about. Enzo Fernandez stepped up to take the penalty. He had taken 5 penalties before in his career and scored every single one of them. And then he missed now. Areola with a really nice save. Areola punishing all those of us that sold him right before the deadline and got in Turner instead. And even started Turner this game week. But yeah, nice penalty save from Areola. Even though the penalty probably should have been taken again. Once again, Souček, he gets away with referee decisions against Chelsea for some reason. Last season he saved a shot from Chelsea with his hand. No penalty. This season he goes into the box too early and clears the ball after the penalty. And the penalty doesn't get retaken. But who cares for West Ham, especially? I don't really care. We won the game. I say we because it's West Ham. And Antonio got the winning goal, or at least the leading goal, the 2-1 goal, because Paqueta scored a penalty towards the end. But yeah, Antonio got the winning goal, which was amazing to see. And I just want to highlight Antonio because I think he's super underappreciated, undervalued, underrated, really, for the past 4 or 5 seasons. He's been the lifeblood for West Ham next to Rice and Bowen. He has been the most important player for West Ham. He's so integral to what David Moyes wants to do, and he scores again. He's the West Ham's leading goal scorer in the Premier League history. So hats off to Antonio. He does so much work apart from scoring goals. And at the start of not last season, but the season prior, he was for 2 or 3 weeks, he was the best striker in the Premier League. I'm not even kidding. Everyone had him in FPL as well, and remember fondly that he scored a lot of goals at the start of that season. I think it was the 21-22 season, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, really appreciate Antonio. Always been a big fan. Bowen looked really good as well for West Ham, and Ward-Prowse got 2 assists. So West Ham have some nice options, but they also have pretty terrible fixtures currently. So probably stay away from West Ham. But they got the win against Chelsea. Chelsea looked really good in the first half. Second half, not so much. We also have to talk about Ben Chilwell, who was the most talked about player after game week 1, I guess. He's gotten 2 price rises already, so he's up to 5.7 in total, 5.6 for those of us that have had him from the start. But he was actually subbed off right after the hour mark, and in came Felipe Caicedo for Chelsea, and he had one of the worst debuts I've ever seen, really. He gave the ball away for a huge West Ham chance earlier. I think it was Fornals who shot it, and it was a nice save from Sanchez. And then you can see the penalty that sealed the game for West Ham as well, after several other pretty bad involvements from Caicedo. So someone who's a huge West Ham fan and a huge Declan Rice fan, kind of funny to see Chelsea's rather than going for Rice, they went for Caicedo for more than what Rice cost, which was already quite a lot. And Caicedo did that badly in the first game against West Ham. But Caicedo's young, probably some nerves playing for a huge team now. And yeah, he's going to come good eventually, but a really bad debut for him. And that led to a West Ham win. So everybody wins. So at least I win because I'm a West Ham fan. But yeah, those were the matches at the weekend. I haven't seen Arsenal against Crystal Palace yet. Looking forward to that game. I have a Berechi essay in my fantasy team, so I'm really interested to see how we can do against one of the best sides in the league. Also interested to see if Declan Rice can actually respond to Caicedo's poor performance and have a really good performance of his own. But yeah, before I leave you at least, we have to talk about some players that had their stock either go up or down. So in terms of stock going up, I think Solly March is someone that has been entirely overlooked. I know Brighton's fixtures aren't the best. They do have the fixture against West Ham now, though, and they always destroy West Ham. I'm going to predict 4-0 to Brighton in this game because I know even when Brighton were pretty bad and West Ham were pretty good, Brighton still managed to win this game against West Ham. And now, under De Zerbi, Brighton look amazing. They're top of the league. And I think they're going to kind of manhandle West Ham because that's really what you can do if you're a good team. And Chelsea did that for one half, but second half, not so much. But yeah, Solly March, Mitoma, Joe Pedro potentially even. I'm going to talk about him pretty soon, as you can see on the screen. But yeah, Solly March especially is someone I want to talk about. But Mitoma is also a fantastic option if you want to go for someone else from Brighton. But Phil Foden is probably my biggest pick of the week. He just looks so good. He plays with the best team in the league still. They have the best fixtures in the league. He's one of the best players in the league. 7.5 in fantasy. I just think the stars are aligning for Foden to be that guy. But the last time I thought that was back in game week 13 last season when he just absolutely sucked from that point on in the season. So maybe not. Whenever I get him in fantasy, at least he tends to do pretty poorly. So maybe if I get him, maybe you should stay away from him. But Foden just looks really good. So I think he is someone you could definitely consider. And then Jan Vissa is the final guy I want to talk more about when it comes to stock going up. he's just been amazing, and I wish I had him from the start of the season. He's only 6.0, plays as the starting striker for Brentford, who keeps scoring 2 or 3 goals every game. He's showed without Tony that he's more than capable of scoring a lot of goals. He's always scored a lot of goals when he's had the chance for Brentford as well. Like the past 2 seasons, he's had 2 seasons prior in the Premier League, and he has always outperformed his XG, and he gets really high XG now. So Wissa is definitely someone you should consider as well in your striker positions, especially as a replacement for João Pedro, because Pedro, I don't know, the playing time, especially with Enciso, whatever, playing so well in that game. I can't really see Pedro starting, maybe as a striker, but probably not as a striker. I can't really see him starting against West Ham. And if he doesn't start against West Ham, why do you even have him? Because they have pretty poor fixtures after that. So I think Pedro, the minutes risk is probably too much for me now to consider him going forward. So probably look to get rid. Marcus Rashford, another one with stock going down, didn't look that good. Bruno Fernandes looked better, but as we know with Rashford, if he gets to play on the left instead of being a striker, I think that's going to be a change from Ten Hag next game as well. I think Sancho is going to play up front, and Rashford is going to play at his favorite left. He could definitely strike back and score against Nottingham Forest, so it's a bit risky to sell Rashford, but at the same time, he's 9.0, so you can get a lot of money back from selling him, but it just depends if you need the money really, because I have Salah and I still feel like I have more than enough money for the rest of my team. So if you don't have Salah especially, do you even need the money? I think you can keep Rashford for another week, but for me, potentially looking to sell him to get Foden, but that's just me. And then finally, Jordan Pickford. Everton conceded 4 goals. They had a really good preseason in terms of clean sheets, but preseason and regular season is completely different. And Everton have shown that. They conceded 4 goals against Aston Villa. We have to remember that Aston Villa are a good offensive side, but I don't know about Pickford as your goalkeeper. But at the same time, doing goalkeeper transfers, is that really the best move to do? Do you really want Sanchez to take up a Chelsea spot as the goalkeeper when Chelsea conceded 3 goals against West Ham? 10-man West Ham for some of the game at that? I don't really know. There are some other decent 4.5 goalkeepers, but even Crystal Palace, Johnston looked like one of the best 4.5 goalkeepers. But Crystal Palace are now linked with Dean Henderson, so maybe he's not an option either anymore. Maybe Mark Flecken, if you want to go with that. Jason Steele as well, I have to mention, he was really good. He was part of the reason why Wolves couldn't score. He had a really nice save on a shot from Fabio Silva especially. So Steele is also a really good goalkeeper. I think he's going to be the starting goalkeeper. I know De Serbia said he's going to rotate between Steele and Verbruggen, but I think Steele for the foreseeable future is going to be the starting goalkeeper. So he's also someone you can go with, but Brighton don't have the best fixtures. So yeah, I think I'll just stick with Pickford for now, even though the stock is going down with him, because they have really easy fixtures. They play Wolverhampton, who can't score at all, and then they have Sheffield United, I think, in the next game after that. So I think I would keep Pickford if I had him still, because goalkeeper transfers are kind of boring. But if you have a transfer to spare, if you don't really see any other interesting options for your team, and you have 2 transfers and you have a transfer that you need to use, then sure, go ahead, switch Pickford to your favorite 4.5 goalkeeper, or potentially even a 5.0 or 5.5 goalkeeper. Ederson looks potentially the best goalkeeper in the game right now, because City are looking really good defensively, and Ederson just keeps getting those 6 points. So yeah, those are some of the options that you can get in for the players. But at the same time, I don't know. It's a difficult week. It's difficult to know who you're going to sell. Most teams look really good in terms of like who they're facing. Most of us have a lot of players playing home matches as well. Most of the popular FPL players have home matches in Game Week 3, so not the easiest week to solve really. But I think the striker position, especially with João Pedro, if you have him, potentially even if you have Watkins, maybe look for one of the strikers, either Jackson, Wissa, or Alvarez would be my 3 best not predictions, my 3 best I can't even think of the words now, suggestions, my 3 best suggestions. So one of those guys, probably whoever you fancy, I would go with probably for João Pedro especially, but potentially also Watkins, since he's not on penalties anymore. But either way, that has been 45 minutes of me rambling about this past weekend's matches in the Premier League. There's going to be a couple more videos this week as well, but I'm going to film pretty much all of them tomorrow on Monday, because I have a guest coming over for the rest of the week, so I'm not going to be able to film that much. But after seeing the Arsenal game, I'm going to have a pretty nice outlook of the rest of the week anyway. So I'm going to do the weekly wildcard draft. That's going to come out on Tuesday this time around. On Wednesday, we'll have the FPL Scope podcast, which is going to be only with me this time, not with Kevin, because I can't schedule it with Kevin with people coming over, and Kevin is kind of busy as well, so I'm going to do that myself, just go through Kevin's team, Chemo's team, the manager of the week, all that stuff by myself. Going to be a similar video to this. And then finally on Thursday, I'm going to post my team selection video for next week, where I'm going to talk more about the transfers that I might make. Rashford to Foden might be one of them, potentially. I don't know. I gotta think about the Rashford thing and the Foden thing, really. But striker wise, I kind of want the money to get to upgrade Pedro to one of the strikers that I talked about. So that video will also come out on Thursday, and that's pretty much the content for this week. So with that, I leave you with this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Give it a like, subscribe if you like this, and I'll see you around. Thank you and goodbye.